How does a teenage video game designer who, made theme park simulations end up winning the 2024 Nobel Prize in Chemistry?
I mean, it sounds like the setup to a really highly specific, very nerdy joke.
It really does.
Um,
But today we are tracking the actual life of Sirdemis Hassabis, the co-founder of Google DeepMind.
right.
We've got this really comprehensive biographical deep dive here, updated right through 2026, and it chronicles his whole journey from like a child chess prodigy
Yeah.
to being named one of Time's architects of AI.
Yeah, the trajectory is wild.
Okay, let's unpack this, because our mission today isn't just to read through a timeline of some guy's career. We want to actually reverse engineer this polymath's brain.
Exactly.
For you listening, we're looking at how mastering the localized rules of digital games became the literal blueprint for solving some of biology's most complex mysteries. Think of this as your shortcut to understanding the mechanics behind the modern AI revolution.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you'll see that Hassabis's trajectory isn't just a series of random, lucky leaps across, different scientific disciplines.
Right, it's not just topic hopping.
No, not at all. It is an intensely logical, almost ruthless progression. He moves from playing games to simulating worlds to simulating human thought, and finally, to simulating the fundamental building blocks of life itself.
So to understand the artificial intelligence he eventually built, we first have to look at the training data, I guess, of his own childhood.
His own programming.
Yeah, exactly. And that all begins with a chessboard.
Right. Hassabis was a chess prodigy at 4 years old, which is crazy.
4.
Yeah. And by 13, he reached master standard, hitting an ELO rating of 2,300. He was even captaining England's junior teams.
Wow.
And you have to think about chess. It's a closed system, right? It has strict boundaries, perfect information.
Perfect information meaning like nothing is hidden from the players.
Exactly. Both players see the whole board. And succeeding requires running mental simulations dozens of moves into the future.
And he wasn't just, playing for trophies either. He took his chess winnings. And in 1984, at the age of 8, he bought his first computer.
An old ZX Spectrum 48K.
Yeah. He just had to have some books and taught himself how to code, which to me is like using your Monopoly winnings to buy actual real estate.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. He used a physical board game to buy a logic machine.
Yep.
And then his very first AI program, which he wrote later on a Commodore Amiga, was designed to play another board game, Reverse.
Yeah, that feedback loop is just crucial.
Yeah.
And he accelerated through traditional educational systems just as rapidly.
He flew through them.
He finished his A-level exams 2 years early at 16, and Cambridge University basically told him he was simply too young to matriculate.
They made him wait.
Yeah, they forced him to take a gap year.
And most kids take a gap year to, backpack across Europe or just sleep in.
Yeah.
But Hassabis entered a magazine competition called Win a Job at Bullfrog.
As you do.
Right. And he lands a gig at Bullfrog Productions. By 17, he is co-designing and lead programming a game called Theme Park, alongside the legendary designer Peter Molyneux.
Which practically invented the simulation sandbox genre.
Totally. And he paid his way through Cambridge University, earning a double first in computer science, by the way, with the royalties from a game he made as a teenager.
It's unbelievable. And then after Cambridge, he led the AI development for the God game Black and White, and then founded his own company, Elixir Studios.
To make that massive
Yep.
political simulator, right?
Yeah.
Republic, the revolution.
Exactly.
Now, playing chess is one thing, but designing a game like Theme Park feels like an entirely different cognitive muscle.
It is, but look at the underlying pattern here. Playing chess requires you to understand how one localized move affects the entire board state 20 moves later.
Right, it's all connected.
Designing Theme Park requires balancing massively complex interacting autonomous systems. When you code a simulation like that, you aren't animating individual digital people.
You're not like, move this arm, move this leg.
No, you are creating rules for behavior. You tweak the price of a roller coaster ticket or the amount of salt on the French fries, and you watch how those localized variables ripple out.
And impact the global happiness of thousands of simulated agents.
Exactly. He was training his mind to grasp how localized inputs create systemic global outcomes.
But eventually, building digital theme parks just wasn't enough for him. By the mid-2000s, Elixir Studios closed its doors. And from what I understand of gaming history, video game AI at the time had hit a hard ceiling.
Yeah, it really had. Video game AI back then wasn't learning in any meaningful
It
sense.
was faking it.
Essentially, yeah. It was just a massive, complex architecture of pre-programmed if-then statements. If the player shoots, then the enemy ducks.
Right.
It was a clever illusion of intelligence, and Hassabis realized that if he wanted to build true general artificial intelligence, tweaking if-then loops wouldn't cut it. He needed to study the only existing proof that general intelligence is actually possible,
Which is the human brain.
the human brain.
So he goes back to school. He enrolls at University College London and gets a PhD in cognitive neuroscience. Just a casual pivot from game CEO to brain researcher.
Just a slight career change.
But he was doing real groundbreaking research. I'm looking at the notes on this 2007 paper he co-authored in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. He studied amnesia patients who had damage to the hippocampus.
Right.
I always thought the hippocampus was just the brain's hard drive for memories. You damage it, you get amnesia. What did his team actually find?
Well, that was the conventional wisdom. But Hassabis and his team discovered a secondary, profound deficit.
Okay.
These patients didn't just struggle to remember their pasts. When asked to imagine a completely new scenario, like, say, standing on a beach they had never visited, they couldn't do it.
Wait, really?
Yeah, they couldn't picture the scene in their mind's eye at all.
But why would amnesia stop you from imagining a fictional beach? That doesn't make sense.
Because Hassabis proposed that memory and imagination are not two separate mechanisms. He developed a theory called scene construction.
Scene construction.
Right. He argued that the brain operates as a continuous simulation engine. The mental process we use to recall a past event is the exact same biological process we use to imagine a future one.
So memory isn't just a dusty filing cabinet where you pull out an old photograph. The brain actively constructs a memory on the fly, the exact same way it constructs a daydream.
Precisely. It is the exact same cognitive architecture.
It's like a Lego set. You use the same bricks to rebuild a model you already made, or you use them to build a spaceship you just dreamed up.
That's a perfect analogy. Or, given his background, it's like a video game rendering engine.
Oh, man. Yeah. When you play a game, the engine spawns the trees and the buildings dynamically as you walk through the world.
Right, and what you're saying is the brain uses that same rendering engine, whether you're loading a saved game, a memory, or generating a totally new map you've never explored.
That is mind-blowing.
What's fascinating here is that this specific biological insight became the philosophical foundation for how he would later design artificial intelligence.
Because he realized the mind is just a simulation engine used for building scenarios to aid with planning.
Exactly. This paper was named one of the top 10 scientific breakthroughs of the year by the journal Science.
So he reverse-engineered the biological brain's rendering engine so he could eventually build a digital one.
That's exactly what he did.
So armed with that, we hit 2010. He returns to his roots in gaming, but he's not building games for humans anymore. He co-founds DeepMind in London.
Yes, with a very famous mission statement.
Yeah, the mission statement they wrote down is famously audacious. Step 1, solve intelligence. Step 2, use it to solve everything else.
A goal that sounds completely absurd until you look at their methodology. They started by combining two entirely distinct fields of computer science.
Deep learning and reinforcement learning, right?
Yes.
Let's break those mechanics down for everyone listening, because just saying they combined two fields doesn't capture what they actually achieved with their DeepQ network, or DQN algorithm.
Right, DQ.
They sat this algorithm down in front of classic Atari games like Space Invaders and Breakout.
Right. Now, traditionally, if you wanted a computer to play Breakout, you would program it to know what a paddle is, what a ball is, and what the physics of bouncing look like.
You keep it the rules?
Exactly. DeepMind didn't do any of that. They gave the algorithm only two things: the raw pixels on the screen and the instruction to maximize the score.
That is wild. How does an algorithm look at a random pixel and know to move a joystick?
That is where the combination comes in. The deep learning part is basically the visual cortex.
Okay.
It uses neural networks to look at the raw pixels and slowly recognize patterns. Like, oh, this cluster of pixels moves when I send a signal to the joystick.
Okay, I follow.
And then the reinforcement learning part is the dopamine system. Every time the score goes up, the algorithm gets a digital reward.
So the deep learning figures out what is happening on the screen, and the reinforcement learning figures out why moving the joystick in a certain way gets a reward.
Exactly. Through millions of trial and error simulations, it learns to play at a superhuman level.
It learned the localized rules and global patterns entirely on its own.
Entirely.
And Google sees this and buys DeepMind in 2014 for £400 million. But Atari was child's play compared to the holy grail of AI, the ancient board game Go.
Go was considered the ultimate test.
Right, because we all know chess can be brute forced by a supercomputer just calculating every possible future move. Why couldn't they just brute force Go?
Because the complexity of Go is almost incomprehensible. There are more possible board positions in a game of Go than there are atoms in the observable universe.
Wait, atoms in the universe.
Literally, you cannot build a search tree deep enough to calculate a guaranteed win. Human Go masters don't calculate, they rely on intuition.
Pattern recognition.
Yeah, pattern recognition and a feel for the shape of the stones on the board.
So an AI has to somehow develop a vibe.
Essentially, yes, a mathematical vibe. DeepMind built AlphaGo using two distinct neural networks. A policy network to suggest the most promising moves mimicking human intuition about what looks like a good shape.
Right.
And a value network to evaluate who is currently winning the game from that position. And then it played millions of games against itself, constantly refining its own intuition.
And it led to an absolute global shockwave. In 2015, AlphaGo beats the European champion. Then in 2016, it beats Lee Sedol, who was one of the greatest players in history, 4-1.
A huge cultural moment.
Massive. And the next year, it sweeps the world number one, Keji. But from what the sources say, it wasn't just that it won, it was how it won.
Move 37.
Yes. During the Lee Sedol match, AlphaGo played Move 37, placing a stone in a spot that human commentators initially thought was a glitch.
They thought the machine broke.
Right, because no human had ever played a move like that in the thousands of years Go has existed.
It was demonstrating a form of alien digital intuition. Hassabis, the child chess prodigy, had successfully built a machine that mastered the unmasterable game.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because DeepMind didn't just retire as board game champions. They let their AI loose on Google's own data centers.
This is a great pivot.
Right. These massive server warehouses get incredibly hot, and cooling them takes vast amounts of electricity. So the AI takes control of the cooling systems and slashes the energy bill by 40%.
A massive real-world impact.
But wait, hold on. A video game is a closed system with perfect information. An HVAC unit is the real world.
Oh, absolutely.
You have friction, unpredictable weather outside, hardware malfunctions. How does an algorithm bridge that gap from a digital sandbox to real-world plumbing?
That is the crucial hurdle. It's known in the field as the simulation to reality gap.
Okay.
Because you are entirely right, the real world is messy. DeepMind didn't just plug AlphaGo straight into the air conditioning.
That would probably be a disaster.
Yeah, it would break everything. Instead, they built an incredibly detailed dynamic simulation of the data center's thermal dynamics.
They turned it into a game.
Exactly. They trained the AI inside that simulation, subjecting it to random hardware failures, sudden weather spikes, and friction models. To the AI, optimizing that cooling system is just another game.
The moves are just adjusting a fan speed or water pump?
And the score is energy saved. Because they built a truly general-purpose learning algorithm, it doesn't care if the game is placing a black stone on a wooden board or dropping the temperature in a server rack.
Because the underlying mathematics of optimizing for a high score are identical.
Exactly identical.
Which perfectly tees up the second half of their founding mission. They solved intelligence in the digital realm. Now it's time to solve everything else in the physical realm.
Right.
And they went after one of the most notoriously impossible problems in biology, protein folding.
This was the 50-year grand challenge of molecular biology.
Right. And for you listening, we don't need to do a basic biology lesson. Proteins are the molecular machines driving your body.
Oh.
What really matters here is the computational nightmare of how they form.
The folding problem.
Yeah, a protein starts as a one-dimensional string of amino acids, but it has to fold itself into a three-dimensional shape to actually function.
And the shape is everything. If you know the 3D structure, you can understand how a disease attacks a cell, or you can custom design a drug to bind to that exact protein.
But predicting that shape is practically impossible, right?
It is. The mathematics of predicting that fold from a 1D sequence is known as Levinthal's paradox.
Levinthal's paradox.
Yes. A typical protein could theoretically fold into 10 to the power of 300 different shapes.
10 to the 300.
Yes.
Yeah.
If a supercomputer tried to brute force calculate every possible fold, It would take longer than the age of the universe.
Wow. So you have a massive space of theoretical possibilities that cannot be brute forced, requiring an almost intuitive leap to find the single correct, elegant shape.
Sound familiar?
That sounds exactly like the board game Go.
The parallel is striking, isn't it? So, DeepMind created AlphaFold. In 2018, their first version won the CASP competition, which is sort of the global Olympics of protein folding. But in 2020, AlphaFold 2 didn't just win, it functionally ended the competition.
How? What did AlphaFold 2 do differently to suddenly crack a 50-year paradox?
Instead of just looking at the physics of how atoms repel or attract each other, AlphaFold 2 utilized an attention mechanism.
An attention mechanism.
Yeah, it's a type of neural network architecture that allowed the AI to look at the entire evolutionary history of amino acid sequences across different species simultaneously.
Oh,
It learned the hidden evolutionary rules of how amino acids spatially relate to one another, and the result was predictions with an error margin of less than the width of a single atom.
subatomic accuracy.
Yeah. The organizers of the CASP competition literally declared the 50-year-old grand challenge solved.
And then DeepMind did something that still bends my mind. Over the next year, they used AlphaFold to predict the structure of all 200 million proteins known to science.
The entire known protein universe.
They folded the whole universe. So
Right.
what does this all mean? They gave it away.
Yes, completely free.
They partnered with the European Bioinformatics Institute and opened a public database. I cannot overstate the staggering generosity of this. They gave the world the ultimate open-source cheat code for biology.
It really changed the landscape. Researchers who had spent years, literally years, trying to determine the shape of a single protein for malaria or antibiotic resistance could now just look it up in a search engine in 5 seconds.
That's unbelievable.
That achievement is why Demis Hassabis, along with his lead researcher John Jumper, were awarded the 2024 Nobel Prize in Chemistry.
And it's why Hassabis received a knighthood.
Exactly.
It is the ultimate high score for a guy who started out playing Atari games. But we can't talk about mastering AI and deploying it globally without talking about the stakes.
No, we definitely can't.
Especially since Hassabis himself is at the center of the debate over AI safety. It's a bit jarring to hear the guy who built this revolutionary tool comparing it to a nuclear threat.
This raises an important question, and our sources highlight a really profound tension in his philosophy. In 2023, Hassabis signed a highly publicized statement warning that mitigating the risk of extinction from AI should be a global priority.
Extinction.
Yes, on par with risks like pandemics and nuclear war. But as impartial observers, it's important we look at his whole stance.
Right, because he's also publicly fighting against the idea of pausing AI development, right? How does he reconcile warning about human extinction while refusing to take his foot off the gas?
He views a global pause as practically impossible to enforce. Bad actors wouldn't stop just because good actors did.
Which makes sense.
But more fundamentally, he looks at the massive upside. The potential to cure diseases, invent new materials, or solve climate change makes the research morally essential in his view.
So what's his solution if not a pause?
His proposed middle ground is the implementation of incredibly rigorous safety testing protocols. He wants the industry to measure exactly how capable and controllable new models are in simulated sandboxes before they are ever released into the wild.
So he is pushing the gas pedal on innovation as hard as anyone on Earth, while simultaneously demanding the industry invent better seatbelts.
That's a great way to summarize it.
That tension makes sense when you look at his entire life's methodology. He doesn't fear complex systems. He builds simulations to understand them.
Exactly.
Looking back at this whole journey, the through line is just incredible.
Yeah.
You have a kid who masters the closed, rigid rules of a chessboard.
Right.
Then he takes that strategic thinking and codes simulated autonomous theme parks.
Yeah.
He hits a wall in game logic, so he goes and reverse engineers the human brain's rendering engine for memory and imagination.
Step by step.
And he takes those biological insights to build digital neural networks that can beat the universe's most complex board game. And finally, he uses that digital intuition to beat the biological game of protein folding.
It is the absolute pinnacle of systems thinking, treating the universe as a series of interconnected rules waiting to be decoded.
And for you listening, the big takeaway here isn't just about AI or chemistry. You don't need a Nobel Prize to apply this framework to your own life.
No, not at all.
When you are faced with a massive, overwhelming challenge, whether it's a career pivot or a complex project, treat it like a game system. Don't get overwhelmed by the whole universe of possibilities. Learn the localized rules. Run your mental simulations. Find the hidden global patterns.
I love that. And I'll leave you with a final concept to mull over, building directly on that.
Okay.
Think back to Hassabis's neuroscience discovery in 2007. The idea that your memory and your imagination are utilizing the exact same rendering engine in your brain.
Right. The scene construction.
Exactly. They use the same raw materials. So if you are currently struggling to imagine a better future for yourself, or you can't visualize a solution to a problem you're facing,
Yeah.
is it possible you don't lack imagination? Is it possible you just need to go out and build some new memories to give your simulation engine better raw materials to work with?
Wow. Now, that is a thought to take with you.
Yeah.
We'll leave you with that.